Arab Canadians, if they donate to a charity that helps Palestinians in refugee camps in Lebanon or distributes medicine in Gaza, are keenly aware that their gift, no matter how small, could land them on a list of terrorist sympathizers, and that could have devastating consequences. We've seen that in cases like Maharar and others. So these flagrant double standards are not normal. And when the shock doctrine came out in September, I wanted to find a way to not be normal in the face of this very abnormal situation of a bookstore that, as I said before, controls 80% of the book market in some parts of this country. So what I did is that in the months that the shock doctrine was on bestseller lists in Canada, I signed many copies, as you can imagine. But I didn't sign a single copy at Chapters or Indigo. In fact, I never entered one of their stores. And I told my publishers that my entire Canadian tour needed to be sponsored by independent booksellers, which it was. And on my website, I direct Canadian readers to buy the book from independent booksellers. As I mentioned, the shock doctrine has a very controversial chapter about how Israel has rejigged its economy to profit directly from the global war on terror industry. And I believe that given Chapters Indigo's near monopoly status, that it has a democratic responsibility to sell books by all authors, not only those who are critical of Israel, but also those who are critical of the political activity of the owners of Chapter Indigo. I think that is very important. And it hasn't fully been tested yet. Now, I don't think that this solution was perfect, as I mentioned. But I am pleased that I did find a way not to act normal, not to be complicit in the normalization of endless war. And that's only been, the part, the beginning of this struggle, because I also had to figure out what to do about the publishing of the book in Israel. My last two books were published in translation, in Hebrew translation, by a commercial publisher called Babel. And I have been, and I knew actually as I was writing this book, and the calls for the boycott came from writers, one writer who I respect in particular, John Berger. I knew that I wasn't going to do that again, but I didn't know what I was going to do instead. Now with No Logo, when it came out in 2001, the second Intifada was on, and I was invited by my publisher to go and promote the book, do a publishing tour. And at the time I decided that I couldn't be part of that kind of normalization, that I wouldn't go to Iraq and Afghanistan to flog my book. I wasn't going to go to Israel just because Israel could create a situation where the war wouldn't touch me and I could have the illusion of being in a country at peace. So I decided not to do that, but instead I gave an interview to Haaretz and I explained this decision. And actually people were quite supportive of it and understood it perfectly. Now, with this book, what I did was, in consultation with John Berger, I asked him how he thought I should do it. And he put me in touch with an amazing Israeli publisher called Andalus. Andalus is an activist publishing house which exclusively publishes work in Arabic, in Hebrew. It exclusively is a translation house. And it's actually quite a new house. It was founded in 2001, or in 2000. And it was founded to address the quite shocking situation that, I'm just looking for the statistic, that only 40 works of Arabic fiction had been translated into Hebrew, I believe, since 1948. Andalus, as a publisher, is constantly struggling, because they're an activist publisher, with how to publish but not be normal. So often they don't participate in book festivals, and they struggle with how to interact with these big cultural institutions. So they seemed to me to be a great fit, because I loved what they were doing. And so what I decided to do was not take any royalty money, not take an advance, and Andalus and I will be issuing a statement that explains that any proceeds that are made will go to more translations. And so, this is really, it's not acting normal, but it's not a boycott. In fact, what it's doing is increasing communication. The way I think of it is that I actually am boycotting the Israeli economy because I'm not profiting from it directly. But the accusation that we're trying to break down communication actually is really challenged, because the idea is that by publishing, and hopefully if it sells a lot of copies, then that will enable Andalus to publish more works in Hebrew by Arabic writers. So that's just another weird example of not being normal in an abnormal situation. It's entirely imperfect, but to quote John Berger, I think it's really important to remember that boycott is not a policy. It's not a principle. It's a tactic, and it's a flexible tactic. And when it starts to get rigid, it starts to get dangerous. And I think it's really interesting in the way the Israeli government has responded to the calls for boycotts is to misrepresent them, deliberately misrepresent them, and claim that there's something that they're not, and claim that they're much more absolute than they actually are. For instance, the academic boycott is not a boycott of individual academics. It's a boycott of partnerships between academic institutions, with the understanding that Israel's academic institutions are very much a part of the state, very much a part of the military machine. So this is deliberately misrepresented as closing down communication between academics, between individuals, which it absolutely is not. We've seen this again with the spin around Turin and Paris, the book fairs, where what people are objecting to is not the presence of Israeli writers. Israeli writers are welcome at both of the book fairs. It's the special status for the State of Israel and the fact that this is a trade mission. This is organized as a trade mission by the State of Israel to Italy and France. It's not about writers. It's about trade. And so that's what people objected to. And Israel turned around, misrepresented it, said these people don't want these writers to bring their books, and everyone loves books and everyone loves communicating. And so I think it's really important, understanding that this is their strategy, that we not play into their hands. So, in closing, I want to say how proud I am as a Jewish Canadian to open this gathering. And I think it's going to be a difficult weekend, but I think it will be a great weekend. Many of us are here because we have tried to effect change within the embedded Jewish organizations. And we've slammed up against that wall where talking points substitute for talk, and questioning is met with aggression and arrogance. I think we need to be very careful not to replicate the patterns that have for far too long characterized the debate about Israel. Sometimes we become the enemy from which we seek liberation. People who have been silenced, oppressed, get their little piece of power, and they abuse the hell out of it. If Israel's tragic history has taught us anything, it is how easy it is for victims to become victimizers, to replicate the same patterns that have scarred our own experiences. So I think we should resolve here tonight to banish those patterns from this space and to embody the democracy that we want to see outside these walls. It won't be easy, because when we talk about Israel and when we question something as fundamental as Israel's birthday, many of us find ourselves in that uncomfortable position of questioning the stories of our childhood, the sacred truths handed to us by people who we trusted most in our lives, our parents, our grandparents, our teachers, our rabbis. We feel angry at them for lying, and we feel angrier at ourselves for ever believing. It's that vertigo feeling that happens when worlds shift, and it happens in any great movement for social change. In the women's movement, they called it consciousness raising. We shouldn't be afraid of it. We should embrace it. It is only when our world shatters that we can begin reconstruction. It is the never-ending work of social change. Thank you.